Yes, that's right. In fact, as we speak, she's still holding her press conference. Grace Poe has been a front runner for a couple of months. And this concession speech is actually very timely, especially now that, as you've mentioned, we've counted 2/3 of the vote. And the gap is, I think, 7 million votes or more, which is a pretty big gap. It's not a tightly contested race, which is quite different from the scenario, I think, a month ago.
All right. We heard in that report that one woman in the city of Davao saying he doesn't kill people who aren't criminals. Your reaction to that?
Well, it's hard to say that because there have been very credible human rights reports about the track record of what they call the Davao death squads. It's interesting because that woman you interviewed says his human rights track record is incorrect. On the other hand, you also have a constituency in the Philippines that think that his human rights record is defensible precisely because he kills criminals. So I think part of the mystique or part of the allure of Rodrigo Duterte is precisely more than this tough talk is really his ability to deliver results that a lot of Filipinos appreciate. Of course, the human rights aspect of it is very much contested, but I think it's also fair to say that that also had an appeal for some voters.
The Philippines has one of the world's highest growth rates, more than 6.2%. How come he has clobbered the party of the outgoing president?
Primarily because the economic growth hasn't really trickled down to the middle classes and to the lower classes. In fact, what's interesting about the initial core constituency of the Duterte candidacy was that they come from the middle classes in urban centers. And this is pretty interesting because while you have the poorest sectors of the population receiving programs from the government, like conditional cash transfers, it is the middle class in urban centers who suffer from the day-to-day struggles of traffic, of contractual labor, of precarious labor conditions. And these constituencies joined the Duterte bandwagon way before the rest of the Philippines did. So I guess just to directly answer your question, you're right. The Philippines has experienced unprecedented economic growth, but that economic growth has not been felt more in the middle classes.
Now, he's been compared to Donald Trump. We're still trying to guess what kind of a president he'll really be. He talked on the campaign trail of crushing crime and corruption within months. He pledged to visit artificial islands disputed with China. But when he voted, we're going to listen to him now. Rodrigo Duterte said he would seek multilateral talks to resolve disputes over the South China Sea. And he also said, let's listen to him, that he'd reach out to his political opponents.
The black propaganda and the false accusations exchanged between two sides. And I would say these are really part of a day's work in an election. But I'd like to say that I'd like to reach my hand to my opponents. Let us begin the healing now.
Nicole Corrado, is it fair that comparison with Donald Trump? We're really wondering what kind of a president he'd really be?
I think to the extent of rhetoric, there are definitely some overlaps. He's also been accused, for example, of a lot of misogynistic comments. So I think one of the more controversial comments he said was he would have wanted to rape a dead Australian missionary in 1998 when he was still a first-term mayor in Davao City. But I think just to counterbalance that narrative, he's not just all rhetoric. It's not all tough talk. In my own research, when I went to southern Philippines, which are the conflict areas, a lot of the people there actually support him because he is the first president of the Philippines who comes from the South. This is very symbolic because southern Philippines is among the most impoverished regions in the country. It has experienced unprecedented and protracted conflict. Since basically the entire history of the Philippines, they've been suffering from a lot of conflict. And so Rodrigo Duterte does represent the voice of the marginalized South. No other candidate is able to bring that voice to the center of the national conversation. A lot of pundits and analysts also have high hopes for Rodrigo Duterte to use his political capital to negotiate with Islamic insurgents, with communist insurgents, precisely because of his no-nonsense character. So on one hand, yes, rhetorically, there are a lot of similarities with Donald Trump. But in terms of substance, I think there are a lot of things we can also look forward to in terms of what he can offer by using his political capital.
And when we hear him there say he's reaching out to his opponents, is he sincere?
I think so. In the Philippines, it has been an incredibly polarized election season. And when he said he's willing to reach out to his opponents, I think that's a good step forward. The Philippines actually had a very good run this election. We had a high electoral turnout rate. We have 80% turnout. We have very fast transmission of results. It's kind of unprecedented that by midnight, when the polls closed at 5 in the afternoon, we have results now. And it's clearly in his favor. The mandate is very clear. So we now saw one concession speech from one frontrunner a few months ago. We're expecting another concession speech from another candidate. And I think the administration bet is set to hold a press briefing also to concede the elections at 10 in the morning tomorrow.